Oh, carpool run. Yeah. I mean, I can lift it. But if I had to like turn it, I can't turn it. And so if I had to like open a doorknob or something, I would be on the ground. Just try to deal with it.
I think we have everyone that we're going to get at this point. So we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order and have a motion to approve the agenda. I move. Second. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. Now, entertain a motion to approve the minutes. So moved. Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Minutes carried. At this point, we'll do a report and discussion on the freight approval. Janet, I believe you're up.
Morning, everyone. As you heard back in June, MPO staff has drafted a freight plan. This purpose of this plan is to examine how the freight system impacts Iowa. This was in development with freight stakeholders as well as our transportation committee, and that helped guide the development and the contents of the plan. Maybe remember, but this is the outline. It starts with the introduction, introducing the timeline of freight planning here at MPO, stakeholder engagement, and the purpose of the plan, as well as outline, goes into the conditions, looking at truck, rail, aviation, and pipelines more specifically. It looks at freight generating infrastructure as well as freight impediments within the MPO planning area. Also, after that, there's a safety chapter that looks to truck, rail, and pipeline safety, followed by a plan considerations chapter, which just outlines freight trend to be anticipated in central Iowa, more specifically the MPO planning area. So that includes analysis of safety, economic impacts, automation, electrification of truck, as well as future projects to be anticipated within the MPO planning area. And lastly, it's an implementation chapter with outlines the MPO will lead and support in the freight space. As brought up before in June, the MPO's goal is mainly to be in these three areas: rail crossings, truck routes, and truck parking. More implementation items found in that fifth chapter of how the MPO can lead and support in the freight space. Public comment period. We had a 30-day public comment period, and there was no comments left online. However, feedback was incorporated from our final working group session, and so that included updating some maps, updating some language, and including a manufacturing section within the existing conditions chapter. Looking ahead, once the plan is adopted, these are kind of the next steps the MPO will take, starting with continuing efforts with engaging with freight stakeholders. So we were invited to a logistics roundtable at the partnership, and so attending that, as well as attending Freight Advisory Council when invited spaces. Additionally, the MPO staff will create a dashboard with all the freight-related data that you find in that document. So it's an interactive way for our member governments to access that data. So that includes those freight impediments that have been identified, include those freight routes, include crossing information and stuff like that. After that, MPO staff can prioritize the freight implementation items that were outlined in the fifth chapter. And then lastly, this plan will be used to inform the next MPO LRTP update, that long range plan, so that data will be used to help inform one of those chapters. This will be brought back to you at the policy committee. So if there's any questions, I'll be happy to take so. If not, I'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Questions for Janet? Thank you. At this time, I think Dylan's going to bring us up to speed on the 2080 agreement and bylaws amendments that the committee's been working on. So,
yes, thank you. So I think everyone's aware that we've been working over the last couple of months on updating the Canadian bylaws. There's some reasons why we're doing this now. When we went through the governance assessment a couple of years ago now, there were a few things that pointed out of just needing to clarify committee roles, making sure that what we're actually doing is reflected in the documents. Last year, we had our certification review with the USDOT, and they also identified a few things that they could be updated in there. So we took on this role of updating the documents. There was a review committee that was formed, and Bob must have gone the straw because he's the only one of that committee that's here today. Defend the recommendations here. The way we went about this was staff initially went through and reviewed the documents, identified some things we thought could be updated, or at least were prone for discussion by the group. And then we grouped those into 3 tiers of items. Tier 1 items are largely just language updates, making sure things are consistent, that they're reflecting current practice. These are pretty minor and they don't impact policy at all. So if you see a comment here, change the word here, this term is no longer used, that sort of thing. Tier 2 is a little more structural in terms of the document's organization. So there were some things that were in the 2080 that they may be a little more sense to be in the bylaws or to be clarified. So those were the changes made there. Again, they might clarify, but they don't change policy or decision making for you. And then there's the tier 3 group, and these were the bigger items that could actually change the policy and how the appeal operates. I will say this committee met 3 times. The first one in tier 1 and 2 was like the first 15 minutes of the first meeting. Yep, that makes sense. And then we spent the rest of the time talking about the tier 3 items. I provided in the agenda packet, and it's on the table before you, copies of the 2080 bylaws, both the red line version with all the changes and then a cleaned up version accepting those changes. So we have those before us. And I will also say before we start going through this, the review committee felt pretty good about these recommendations, but all understanding that it goes before exec, it goes before policy. These are still subject for massaging and tweaking and wholesale changing if we need to. With that preamble, I'll jump into some of those recommendations. So starting with tier 1, like I said, these are minor terminology changes, clean up. Some of the big ones to point out, population, the way that we actually look at population for assessments and for voting and so forth, we use the census estimate that comes out every year from the Census Bureau. The way the language is in there today, it says the official decennial census or census. Again, it's not super clear. So we want to make it very clear that we can use those census estimates like we have been and just make sure everyone's on the same thing. So that was a big part of this. And then there's a lot of references to that population. So it just keeps updating those references back. There's a few places where we're just inconsistent with what we do in the 2080 bylaws, making sure all that's consistent. The language said that we'll meet monthly. We don't meet monthly. We meet 10 times a year. So little things like that, just making sure that we're all reflecting what we actually do. In terms of tier 2, like I said, this is a lot of just reorganization within the documents. So you'll see some places where there's a lot of red. A lot of that is it moved from one section to another, or it moved from the 2080 to the bylaws. A few things to point out here. There was a little bit of inconsistency in who we consider advisory members, who can be advisory members, associate members, and just making sure that that's just very clear. There's also just a terminology as it refers to the MPO that we wanted to make sure is clarified. It defines the executive committee, it defines the technical committee. The documents didn't really define the policy committee. It just referred to the MPO, and I think it was assumed that that was meant to reference the policy committee. So rather than assuming, we just said the policy committee is this group of people, they are the ones in charge. Made sure that that was consistent throughout the documents. A little bit of open meeting records, making sure that was cleaned up as well. Before I move on from those tier 1 and 2, like I said, the review committee said, yep, these all look good, but I want to pause here real quick before we move on to the bigger issues and see if anybody has questions about these.
I have concerns about the open meeting language, and I'll talk to you offline.
Okay.
I don't want to waste everybody else's time.
No, not at all. During policy, it's not resolved, then I will obviously bring it up. Okay. All right. Yeah, we'll take care of that. Okay, so moving on, if there's nothing else, to the tier 3 items. These items, like I said, are a little more meaty, and these are the things that we spent most of the time talking about. Some of these are kind of interrelated, so I'll talk about those together, and then some of them are a little more handoff. So voting was the first thing, one of the first things we talked about. In our 2080, we have a mechanism. The way that the committee is structured, it's based on population. So the more population you have, the more representatives.
Is that what we're looking at?
That is in 2080, yes.
Okay.
That is where
This is the red line, not the bylaws.
correct.
Okay.
Yep. There's also a mechanism for a weighted vote, where a community can call for a vote, that their vote is equal to the population of their community. From anyone's knowledge, a weighted vote has never been used. We have kind of two ways to go about this, and this is one of those things that USDOT looks at and says, how do you actually vote? Because you have these two things in here. So we posed to the group, do we want to keep weighted vote? Do we want to keep both things? Do we want to keep weighted vote and just go to every member gets one representative? Or do we want to keep it the way it is where you have representation based on your population and do away with the weighted vote? And the recommendation was keep it the way it is and do away with the weighted vote. Now, I'll pause there because I know that could be one where we might not all be in agreement, but
Was the group that was over Dean and so forth, I mean, were they kind of unanimous in that?
yeah, no one seemed to object to this. They thought there's a potential that others might not like that, but no, they all seem to be in agreement.
We've never used the weighted vote.
Not anyone's not.
Doesn't it work like we would have to get like Ankeny and West Des Moines to agree?
You have to have two communities agree to do it. And then you have to have 75%,
Yeah.
3/4 vote to have anything.
3/4 vote of the entire population of the.
Yeah.
To add up to the.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not.
So, and like I said, it's never been used. Even some of the, if we were to keep it in there, there'd be some other things we need to clarify because just because it's never been used, some of the mechanics of it might not make sense. We want to make sure that everyone's clear of how that would work. I would also note too, it can't, there are in the bylaws, it sets out what it can and cannot be used for, so it can't be used for certain things. But
So when you take out weighted vote, then the alternative is just
continue doing the way we
continuing
The way
as it
the
is.
policy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Moving down, the next item there is language at the very, let me find it here, on the beginning of the 2080. And I'll tell you the page number here real quick. If you look at the top of page 4, within the very last part of Article 2, it says the MPO is also authorized to carry out other such activities that foster collaboration among communities, et cetera, et cetera. This is something that we pointed out that has become, or had been an issue at some point. As the MPO creeped into some more non-transportation things, that was the section people pointed to and said, well, we're allowed to do it for this. So we wanted to point that out. Say, are we comfortable keeping that in or do we want to take it out? The group said, we're comfortable keeping it in. We have the decision matrix that we have now where if something does come up, we have a mechanism to consider it. So why would we take it out with ourselves from doing it? The other issue with that paragraph is that we felt could allow the MPO, if we want to do a funding swap like we talked about, that there's language in there that would allow the MPO to do that kind of thing. If that wasn't in the bylaws of the 20D somewhere, we thought we might need to add that in there to just enable the MPO to do that. But felt that language would suffice to allow that to happen if we should do that. So that was something that was looked at, but we kept it, no changes, just kept it.
It's flexible. I see the confidence flexible enough that it still allow you to do the funding swap.
Correct. That's what we felt like. That's maybe a Scott question, but yes, it does mention that. It does mention something about fiscal, financial.
Did you reference the decision matrix and all that for this?
We did not.
Okay.
We could do
Well,
that.
it would be helpful if maybe that was included in there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I know right now we're all under agreement, but in 5 years, you know, and
Yeah, we can do that. It does reference other policies, procedures, and so forth throughout the document, so we can.
I would
more
reference
specifically reference
specifically to that.
Moving into the bylaws, there was a section in there under the executive director section that says something about the executive director may hire fire staff in consultation with the executive committee. And we had a question of what does that mean? What does in consultation mean? Do we mean that you have to bring any personnel changes to get approved by executive committee? And I don't think anybody thinks that's what it actually intends to be. So that language is clarified to just say that we will keep the committees apprised of any changes. So, hey, we had a staff member leave, we're working to fill it. Now we fill the position, not giving approval, but keeping everybody in the loop.
So are we done looking at 2080? Now we've moved on to the other one or?
Yeah, I'm just kind of going through both of them
Okay,
together. I'm
Okay.
not going through each document one by one. I'm just kind of going down the slide here.
okay.
But it's there if you want to reference anything. There was language in there. This is something when we did the public participation plan a few months ago, there was a conversation among the group of better defining the different committees that we have. So we have steering committees, we have roundtables, we have subcommittees of just what do those mean and what are their kind of what are the powers that they have. So that subcommittee section was expanded to clarify what that means. And if you recall back when we did the public participation plan, it was sort of a matrix. Is the participation open or is it closed? And is the participation ongoing or is it a limited duration? And so we kind of took that matrix and just put it into Word and put it into the bylaws. Makes sense so far? Okay. All right, now to the one that I imagine we might have some conversation is discussion about changes to the executive committee structure and officer terms. So when we went into that, this is something that has been, I think it was raised when we did the governance assessment. It's something I hear from individual members from time to time. The executive committee, at least the perception is the executive committee has the power. And I know when Mark Holm took over his chair, he kind of changed that a little bit to where we don't vote, more of a recommending, it's more of an advisory type of group. But is it too big? Is it, is it just, is the way it works, does the way it work make sense still? So we went through a SWOT analysis of this, and I've got that up there on the screen. And I know some of the strengths are this group has pretty good conversation. It's good representation. We've got east side, west side, big city, small city. We got a mechanism to allow everyone to participate. And then it gives a chance to kind of preview items before it goes to the full policy. Some of the downsides or weaknesses potentially are that the subcommittee process, how we get folks from east side, west side, and so forth, is kind of convoluted. It's not super transparent. And if we keep that in there, that's something we want to make sure we clean up in the bylaws in 2080. It can be difficult just the way that it's structured, where we have designated representatives from Ankeny, West Des Moines, Polk County, Des Moines, and then the sub areas. It's kind of set. There's no election from among the group at large. So if you're, an east side representative and you're there and you rotate off in 2 years, it's hard to ever ascend into a leadership position. So it kind of favors those who are from the large communities who might be there for year after year to ascend into that leadership position. So that was seen as a potential weakness for it. Some opportunities that we discussed was reducing the size. And by reducing the size, you put more emphasis on the policy committee. It might reduce that perception that this committee is more in charge than policy, and also could reduce the duplicative nature of this meeting. Oftentimes you hear the exact same presentations, the exact same agenda in 2 weeks in a row, or a couple times a month. And while there's benefit to that, it can be pretty just repetitive. The threat of doing all that, of course, is do we meet too infrequently? Are there too few people involved? Quorum could become an issue if you only have 7 people, and like today, half don't show up, and that can be an issue too. So that was the thinking process as we go through the rest of this. So what we heard when we talked about this with that group was the executive committee should be focused on a more higher level set of conversation. It shouldn't be looking at every single item that comes through the policy committee. It should look at the high level strategy items. It should help advise policy, should help advise staff. Shouldn't gatekeep to get to policy. So everything that comes through exec should also go to policy. Those were some of the conversations that we had. And I think there was also a thinking of it doesn't have to be the exact replication of the policy agenda. It should be, let's just focus on the high level stuff, provide that guide, and move on. So some of the recommendations were to make it flexible, smaller, and a little more flexible. So 2018 was the last time we updated the bylaws in 20E. That's the time we went from having a 7-person executive committee to a now 11-person committee. So we said, let's just go back to the 7-person committee. That would be comprised of 3 officers, and then the other 4 at large, if we want to, could still be based on geographic, representation or size. With the geographic representation or size, one idea was to not dictate that in the bylaws, but instead say that will be addressed annually in the work program. So in the work program, if we feel like, yeah, this year it makes sense to continue doing what we're doing, where we have east side, west side, whatever, that's outlined in the work program. And then if we ever want to change it, if there's something that comes up that it makes sense to have it be done a different way, we can do that. One thing that was sort of on people's minds is right now the threshold for being a designated rep or a sub area is 50,000. We've got some communities like Urbandale that's just a few thousand away. So by our current bylaws, once they were hit 50,000, now we have a 12-person executive committee. Now that changes the makeup of those sub areas that we currently have. So to make it a little more flexible and adaptable going forward, this was one solution, was to just put that in the work program, and then we can make changes a little more on the fly as we go forward. One idea for what that could still look like is up there on the screen. So you have basically 1 person from Des Moines, 1 from either Polk County or communities over 50,000, 1 from east side, 1 from west side. So it would be a little bit of a change, but still.
And that would be irrespective of the 3 leadership.
Correct. So you have 3 that are elected from at large, if you will, and then 4 that are a little more determined by geography. But again, these are ideas. Happy to discuss. But several of these things are tied together, so let me go through the rest of them, and then we can open it up for more discussion. Officer selection is also something that ties into this, and I would say officer selection as well as executive committee selection. Right now, that happens after the beginning of the year. So basically, in February is when we have votes to elect officers in the executive committee, and they take effect in March. And if you recall from the last several years, we've had vice chairs who don't run for re-election, or we have changes in local elected terms and so forth, to where we have a gap where someone's term ends at the end of December, but then our MPO terms don't start until March. We've got that little bit of a gap. So the idea that we had was, let's just elect everybody in November. It's kind of straightforward. Communities might not know. They'll know who won election if it's a local election year. They might not know who they're going to put on the MPO yet. But since we're talking about officers and the executive committee, the likelihood that a community is going to have someone newly elected and then think that they're going to be on the executive committee or be an officer is probably low. Probably want to have someone who's been around a little bit, with some experience with the MPO to be in that position. So I didn't think that was probably too. The other thing with that, again, given the vice chair situation we've had the last few years, is to really treat the vice chair position as a chair-elect position. So the expectation is if you are vice chair in at most 2 years, because the chair can do 2 one-year terms if they want to, or if they're chosen to, but in that after that term ends, you will be the chair. There's a mechanism that if they're really not working out as vice chair, it doesn't have to be that way. There's an out, but that's the expectation anyway. That
Secretary doesn't automatically move to the vice chair then.
we didn't put that in there. I mean, we could put a succession and everything, but
6-year term. Which would be well.
hopefully that would make a little more consistency of leadership among the chair and vice chair. Similarly, with the other positions, the non-officer positions, just have those selected in November as well. And knew it was going to happen. Since like I said, the selection of sub areas can sometimes be a little convoluted and it's not super transparent. I don't think they all do it the same way. One idea is just in November at that meeting, take a few minutes. Those communities can get together, huddle up, pick who they're going to have, and then report that to the full group. And that way, it's very clear of who was in the conversation. If you want to be considered, be at that meeting and make the choice then. Obviously, some of those discussions can happen ahead of time, but that's where it's reported out. Right now, it's kind of unclear. We might get an email from Dean saying, yeah, the East Side reps are, Ian Len. We have no knowledge of whether that meeting actually took place, if he's just making that up, not that we would ever do that. But those are the types of things we're trying to look out for, just making sure that it was a very clean, transparent process. And
So what was the rationale for doing November instead of January? Because for example, I know, I mean, when the election's in November, but we don't do our appointments until December.
Right.
When our mayor.
This kind of gets into the next item a little bit of typically don't meet in December and potentially don't meet in January. So doing it in November, make sure that when we hit January 1st, we have all that squared away. But again, the kind of comments we need here, if that just makes sense.
So if the vice chair is someone from Des Moines, then no one else from Des Moines will sit on the exec.
Not necessarily. The three officers, the way we envision this, three officers would be elected from the group. So let's say they elected Des Moines representative to be one of the three officers. And then you go to those four kind of dedicated ones, which says one is from Des Moines. So you could end up having two from any community, really, or two from a community that has multiple reps, or two from East Side, West Side, whatever. Yeah. So there's still that
Still on
opportunity.
There's still one from Des Moines, one from Ankeny, one from West Des Moines.
Well,
And then how do you get the other people involved? Since they have more than 50, Bob's gonna have more than 50,000 probably next year.
what we're saying here is rather right now, because there's 11 people, we say anybody over 50,000 plus Polk County has a designate, you're permanently on the executive committee. You're always going to. What we're saying here is if we go down to 7, you basically have one from Des Moines, then you have one representing the larger suburban communities. So West Des Moines, Ankeny, Polk County, soon to be Urbandale. So from among those,
Just one.
you have one representative.
I mean, I don't know if that's is why. I mean,
Well, this is just an idea. I mean, it could be, we could get rid of all of this.
Yes,
Say
like-
elect all 7 from among the group.
My question was, are we solving a problem that doesn't exist?
Right. Well, that was a question of when again, back in 2018, we went from having a almost 50-person policy committee and dropped it in half.
Oh, yeah.
And so the offset of that was make the executive committee bigger and ensure that there's representation. We're not touching anything with the policy committee. That seems to work okay. But if we go back to the smaller executive committee, one of the conversations was, how big should it be? And does it need to have these? Do you need to have someone dedicated from East Side, West Side, big city, small city?
I think it makes everyone feel like they're more involved though when you do, because when you say Ankeny, West Des Moines, and Urbandale and Polk County is only going to get one rep. I mean that, and if you're not on the chair, vice chair, or secretary, well, that I mean, I don't know.
Well, to Joe's and Ted's point, I was waiting for you to finish, but I just being on both, I've enjoyed it. And you kind of said it, we're not supposed to be a gatekeeper. Okay, so what is the goal of the executive committee? I always felt like it was, I mean, yeah, you're right terms like stink test, like, okay, no, I don't know if that's really what we.
That's what it has been.
Now rarely have we been in disagreement on clarify, but it's just, so I guess maybe it's work out. What is the goal of the?
Yeah, I think the goal, as far as what I would consider, and what the review committee also said was make it an advisory group to help staff and the policy committee have the conversations and make the decisions that they need to make. Right?
I mean, I think your point of, we've had some redundancy. I don't want to kill to death, but I don't know, maybe we just leave it the same.
I mean, I think it's working. Everyone's involved right now,
And that's totally fair. This is why we're bringing it to you.
and it's just a matter of we are an advisory. So if there's 7 or I mean, today if you only had 7 representatives, you're not making a quorum. I mean, you're not. So I would, if it was me, I just leave it the way it is. I think it's working well. And get the subgroups to, if you want them to get together, like, okay, in the meeting in November, you guys all get together, the leadership, the mayors, figure out who's gonna be your rep. We just move on from November. I don't know, I mean, I don't think this is broken here. I don't think it needs fixed.
Yeah, I agree. I think it works fine. And I think we have good representation and not everyone showed up every time.
Right.
So the conflict, I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I can see for changing the time, like you said.
Yeah,
but
that's
for
fine.
reasons. Yeah, that makes sense, but I'd be fine with keeping it the way it is, but that's just me.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's an opportunity when we have multiple eyes on the documents during exec. Ask for clarification from staff to vet those products before they go to policy, so policy's time is more productive. If we kind of had a set of eyes on there and say, hey, but what about this? Make sure that gets included in this document, or decision matrix. I mean, just things like that. It's an opportunity for us to kind of clean that up so when policy meets their time, it is more well used, I guess I would say.
Yeah, these are all good feedback. That's, you're playing the role right here. This is an example of it. One other thing, so we talked about the distributing the timing. One other thing that we talked about was, I think we talked about that. Okay. Is how frequently should the group meet? And again, this was thinking maybe the group will be shrunk a little bit. But if it's going to be more focused on the high level strategy and providing guidance to staff, and this goes into not just the executive committee, this is affecting all committees. One idea was a change of calendar to where we have, bear with me as I explain this, the fall session and the spring session, where we meet from August, September, October, November. We take off December and January. Those meetings are typically winter break. It's hard to get people there anyway. We'll come back February through May, take off June and July. So that is an idea there in and of itself.
And that's the policy and exec?
That would be policy and technical committee. The idea with exec is that they would meet only every other month during that time.
But presumably, for example, in the August exec, you would have a pretty good sense for what's coming up in September policy.
Exactly. So the way that why we looked at this was when we look at our big things that happen, September with our new schedule is when, so Friday of this week, applications for SDBG, funding will be due. So really in September, that's when all the meetings are going to be happening to review those, hear the presentations, so forth. November is when all these decisions will be made. Every 5 years when we do our long range plan, that's when that plan is due. March is when the work program draft. May is when the work program final, and then the tip. So by meeting in August, you're getting a preview, just like you're saying, Ted, of what's going to come the next couple. You can provide that guidance.
Like that, I think that's good.
You kind of put it a month ahead.
I like the schedule to keep the number.
The tip is the one thing, typically we approve the tip in June. If we don't meet in June, we would just move that up in May. And we've already discussed that with the DOT. A little more work on our end, but nothing unsurmountable. I would also clarify too, that if we do go to a schedule like this, if tip amendments come up, if change orders for projects come up, we still reserve the right to hold a special meeting. So sounds like, at least this side of the room, I don't know, haven't heard from over here, likes this schedule. What about, I'll look to you guys. What are your thoughts on the schedule of the kind of spring, fall bunch? And then the executive committee 4 times a year versus 10 times a year?
I really like it.
I know you're on the committee, so I guess I'm looking at
This is new information, obviously, we get packet, so I'm going to be a little tight to think through this. Haven't we canceled some meetings previously, and when the trip to DC comes up, etc.? Is that calculated into your calendar?
yeah, and that's just like, May, we're saying don't meet because that's typically when DC trip is in May. So I think the last thing, but either way,
Yeah.
I should say too, nothing's being decided yet. We'll bring this back next month after we hear from policy. We'll be more opportunity to discuss. Final thing that the group talked about, again, is not necessarily in the bylaws in 20E, is do we want to consider a different name, especially for the policy committee? Policy committee, and this came about as we looked at the document. Like I said, it just kind of referred to MPO. It was kind of ambiguous as to what do we mean by that? Is that staff? Is that policy committee? What is it? So this kind of led us down this path. By using the term policy committee, I think staff and the steering committee that reviewed this also thought that kind of implies that it's under something else, when really it's the board, it's the group. So do we call it, and there's ideas here. We didn't come forward and recommend any one. There was kind of a debate of should it have transportation in the name? Should it be the transportation board? Should it be more general and the MPO board of directors and so forth? I think everyone liked having it be a board or a commission versus a committee, but that's something for consideration here. Technical committee, we could do the same thing, but it's not as, I mean, that name's a little more descriptive of what it actually does. Didn't know about that. Opinions, thoughts on that?
Well, if you want to get rid of the committee policy, that's your choice.
Yeah.
So.
That's what we talked about in the committee.
Regional Transportation Commission.
Metropolitan Planning Board sticks with the Metropolitan, you know.
Right.
I like that, or MPO board of directors. Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Do you think that would help? Is that maybe that's not a
I
concern?
agree with your comment that from outside people or people, committee sounds like it's a subsection of something else, when really the policy is making the final decision.
I agree with that too. And I think there's a better name.
Yeah. And I think those go with Metropolitan.
Any one of them.
Right. So yeah, and that's the other thing is if you call it the planning board, does that convey what this group does more than the computer board, or policy committee, or whatever it might be for education committee?
Yeah.
ChatGPT and say.
That's what a lot of us think, right?
I think it makes sense though.
Yeah.
Put it up to policy and see what everyone thinks. Okay.
Okay, so to recap, sounds like for the most part, everything we presented is pretty good, except keep the executive committee the size that it is today. Is that kind of big takeaway I'm hearing here?
But still some questions that, I think more definition on those 4 individuals, if you will, that would be on, exec and be in the bylaws and not flex and be inconsistent every year. We're doing something different, a different process. I mean, it should be well defined in my mind, so that if somebody's looking towards those positions, they understand this is what it takes. Oh, the next year we've changed the rules.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think if we were to keep it as 11, we would just keep the language basically the same, and it's just a selection process. Like we
Yeah, and doing that here, I think that keeps it open.
thank you for feedback on that. We'll present this to policy next month with suggested tweaks and so forth, and ready to approve it.
Word. Informational items, any questions or comments on any of these items? If not, I'll entertain a motion to waive. Oh, we don't.
One thing I'll point out is in the agenda packet, there was 1 change order for water trails. We've now got a second one. So when this comes to policy committee, we'll have 2 change orders. Nothing for better.
Any other items of interest?
I've got a few updates.
Okay.
Just some things that might be of interest to you. Like I mentioned, on Friday is our application deadline for our funding grant. So we're starting to receive those coming in, and stay tuned. We'll present what projects came in. We get into the next couple of weeks. Grimes line update. The Surface Transportation board has granted the abandonment, so that part is officially, they have granted the abandonment, and they have also approved the rail banking. There's a couple of ways this could go, but rail banking was what we wanted to see, that's what they did. So now that starts a 180-day window for the region to negotiate to acquire that corridor. So that process, we're setting up meetings.
So we're in that window now.
Okay. So we're working with communities to get that all set up. So that is also, so that's kind of the status of it. Pre-negotiation work. I know there's been conversations between INHF, the railroad, of what's valued at, what that's going to look like. So we're getting close on that. I think there'll be the meeting in September and October that will really finalize what that looks like. So we stay within the 180-day window, but have a little more direction on what that looks like. Future 435. That is getting underway. We call this a study to look at the ag users. Today, there's actually a couple of meetings going on. Gunner's at those right now. There's one this morning, I think, in Clive. There's another one in Indianola this afternoon with the co-ops are hosting that. So this is where we start to hear from the ag users directly, get their survey information of how often they use it, where they're going to and from, what they're hauling, all that kind of information that we're going to need to make those decisions. So that is underway. Things not flipping here. Yeah, I think that's what I had.
On Grimes Lane, Bill, and I know I've heard someone was against individual landowners for trying to purchase it somehow. Have you heard anything about that?
I've not. There were some law firms from out of state that were hosting meetings. The community, residents could get retribution or what do I want to say? Get some compensation from that. That doesn't affect this process. It's kind of a whole separate other thing. But aside from that, I have not heard too much. We have had some people reach out to us saying, hey, we have homeless people in our backyard. We do this, could put more people back there. And we said, look, we're gonna have to go through a process that will come out as we go through that process. But the visioning, stay tuned. That's what I want.
Next meeting is scheduled for 11:30 Thursday, September 3rd. Hearing no other business, I entertain a motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you all.
You guys, yeah.